never wanted to be important. That is the first thing you should know about me. My name is Marcus Vale. I am 34 years old. I fly a beat-up salvage rig called the Stubborn Mule through the dead corridors of explored space, picking through wreckage that bigger ships leave behind. I drink terrible coffee. I talk to myself too much. I fix things with my hands when my brain has given up. I am nobody. I was nobody. That changed the day I heard a child crying in the dark. The debris field near the Vethcon trade corridor was quiet the morning everything shifted. Space is always quiet, of course. That is something films never get right. There is no sound out here, only the soft hum of your own ship breathing around you, and the low beep of scanners doing their patient work. My coffee supply was down to the emergency packet I kept taped under the console, the one that tasted like burnt cardboard and regret. I was tired, underpaid, and completely at peace with both of those facts. Then my scanner caught something it had no business finding. A distress beacon, military encryption, Vethcon royal encoding. I stared at it for a long moment. The Vethcon sovereignty controlled 14 star systems and had warships that could fold me into a small metal cube without much effort. Their royal signals were not something a human salvage operator was supposed to intercept, respond to, or frankly even acknowledge. The smart move was to log it, report it to the nearest relay station, and continue on my way. I thought about the smart move for approximately 4 seconds. Then I turned the ship around. The wreckage was worse than I expected. A Vethcon royal courier vessel, maybe 60 meters long, had been torn open by rail fire. The kind of damage that tells a story quickly and badly. Pirates. Old targeting pattern, efficient and cruel. The ship was spinning slowly in the void, venting atmosphere from 3 different wounds in its hull. My scanner said most life signs were gone. Most. One remained, faint, deep inside the ship. I had 12 minutes before the atmosphere bled out completely. I want to be honest with you. I did not feel heroic. I felt the way you feel when you see a problem that your hands can solve and your conscience will not let you walk away from. I grabbed my cutting gear, sealed my helmet, and crossed into the wreck through a hole in its side that the rail fire had conveniently made for me. The inside of the ship was dark and tilted, and full of things I did not want to think about. I moved fast. 3 sealed bulkheads stood between me and that life sign, and my cutting torch was a salvage tool, not a rescue instrument, but I made it work. I always make things work. That is the only skill I have ever been truly proud of. I found her in a rear compartment, curled behind a sealed cargo box that had protected her from the worst of the impact. She was small, young. Her skin had the pale, crystalline quality of Vethcon people, faintly luminous even in the dark. But right now, it was dimmed with pain and blood loss. A hull fragment had caught her on the left side, near what I would later learn was her secondary heart. She was unconscious, breathing in shallow pulls, and she could not have been more than 14 years old in any unit of measurement that mattered. I have no children. I have no family left to speak of, but I know what a child in danger looks like, and I know what it does to something deep in your chest. I pulled the fragment. I applied patch foam over the wound. I picked her up. I made it back to the Stubborn Mule with 90 seconds to spare. She woke up 3 hours later in my crew bunk, which was the only real bed on the ship. I had cleaned the wound properly by then, run her vitals through my basic medical scanner until it stopped giving me alarming readings, and covered her with the thermal blanket I usually kept folded in a corner, pretending it was not there for comfort. She looked at me and went completely still. I raised both hands slowly. Universal gesture. I have no weapons. I am not a threat. I read once that the motion means different things to different species, but in practice, the calm and the slowness tend to carry the message regardless. My translation matrix was the cheap kind, the kind that drops words and occasionally invents new ones. We spent the first few minutes in a frustrating loop of broken communication. She kept saying something I could not parse, a word that my matrix could not find an equivalent for. She said it calmly, not in fear, almost like she was reminding herself of something. I gave her water and a protein bar, which she looked at with deep suspicion before eating anyway. I pointed to myself and said my name. She pointed to herself and said hers. Say Vara, I repeated it carefully. She corrected my pronunciation twice. By the third attempt, she made a small sound that might have been a laugh, and the tension in the room dropped by half. I set a course for the nearest Vethcon border beacon and let her sleep. I remember sitting at the console afterward, watching the stars, thinking that I had done something moderately interesting with my morning. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. The border station was called Soleth Var, and when I announced over open channel that I had a survivor from the destroyed courier vessel, the response was not what I expected. Warships appeared, not one, not two. 7 Veth-Con military vessels decloaked around me in a ring so precise it looked choreographed. Weapon systems lit up my proximity alert until the panel sounded like a smoke alarm. My hands went flat on the console, and I spoke very carefully into the comms. Before I could finish my sentence, Sevara walked into the cockpit, leaned over my shoulder, and broadcast her own voice. Silence followed. Deep, total, immediate silence. Then every weapon aimed at me powered down at once. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in several minutes. They escorted me to the capital world with the kind of formation usually reserved for heads of state. I sat in my pilot seat in my worn work jacket and my scuffed boots, and I watched an entire military escort treat my battered salvage rig like it was carrying something precious. Technically, I suppose it was. Queen Aethris Velsovan was 8 feet of composed authority and barely contained grief. She stood at the center of a receiving hall that made cathedrals look modest, surrounded by advisors and guards, and the particular thick silence of people trying very hard to maintain dignity while feeling something enormous. When Severa walked in, the queen moved. Not quickly, quietly. She crossed the floor of that magnificent hall and gathered her daughter and held her with the careful, deliberate tenderness of someone handling the most important thing in the world. I looked at the ceiling. It felt like the right thing to do. When the queen finally turned to me, her eyes were clear and still. Her translator, unlike mine, was perfect. She asked me why I stopped. She said I had been outside Veth-Con jurisdiction. She said I had no legal reason, no political reason, and no profitable reason to answer that beacon. She said humans were not known for involvement in matters that did not concern them. I told her the truth, because I did not have anything more impressive to offer. I said she was a child. I said I had 2 working hands and a cutting torch and enough time. I said that was all the math I needed. The queen was quiet for what felt like a long time. The court around us was so still that I could hear my own heartbeat. Then she said, "Name your reward." And I said, genuinely, that fuel credits and safe passage back to the trade corridor would be more than enough. The court reacted. I do not fully understand Veth-Con facial expressions, but I understand the energy of a room full of people who cannot believe what they just heard. It filled the hall like a wave. The queen looked at me for another long moment, and I am almost certain she smiled. She did not give me fuel credits. What she gave me instead was something called Vel Sharath. The translator stumbled on it, as my cheap matrix had stumbled on Sevara's repeated word in the ship. The queen explained it herself, slowly, in words her translator rendered with care. It meant, approximately, one who stands within our shield. It meant that under Veth-Con law and custom, I was now under the personal protection of the crown. In 14 star systems and across 40 more where the sovereignty's name carried weight, Marcus Vale, salvage operator, was untouchable. She also gave me a ship, a sovereign-class diplomatic runner, the kind of vessel that made port authorities stand up straighter when it came through. I stood in that receiving hall in my old jacket, and I did not have a single word. She said simply that the universe should know that the Veth-Con do not forget. Before I left, Sevara found me alone in the docking bay. She was composed now, dressed in proper clothes, her wound sealed and her color returned. She looked like what she was, a royal daughter, poised and careful. But she walked up to me like a person, not a princess. She held out a small bead on a thin cord, dark, slightly warm to the touch, with a faint inner glow that shifted when it caught the light. She said something, and the translator caught it this time. She said it was called a Velcom, that in her culture, the one who saves a royal life becomes part of the royal story, written into it permanently, remembered as long as the story is told. She tied it around my wrist herself. I told her to take care of herself. She told me, very seriously, that she intended to. Then she went back to her world, and I went back to mine. I did not cry. The docking bay had unusual humidity. Word travels fast in a galaxy where information is currency. Within weeks, the story had spread through trade channels, diplomatic networks, and the particular informal system of port gossip that moves faster than any official broadcast. A human, Velsharath, the Queen's own decree. Reactions were complicated. Some species were skeptical, some were calculating. Some, without meaning to, became slightly more careful when a vessel bearing a Veth Khan diplomatic seal crossed their path. I learned the weight of it 3 months later. I was passing through a relay station when I caught a distress signal from a human colony ship called the Ardent Hope. 4,000 people bound for a settlement world, stopped dead in space by a pirate syndicate that operated in the gap between jurisdictions. Normally, no major power would intervene. Humans were not worth the political cost of a confrontation. I filed a transit request through Veth Khan diplomatic channels. I asked for nothing military. I asked only to carry their seal. They authorized it the same day. I flew to where the Ardent Hope was being held. The pirate vessels scanned me, identified the seal, ran the name associated with it, and after a silence of about 40 seconds, they moved aside. I escorted 4,000 people to safety without firing a single weapon. They never knew my name. That was fine. I knew what had happened, and I sat with it quietly in my cockpit for a long time afterward, drinking coffee that was somehow even worse than the emergency packet. About a year after everything, Sevara sent me a personal transmission. She was older in the way that a year in royal education changes a person, more measured in her words, more aware of what she was, but she spoke to me the way she had in the docking bay, like a person talking to another person, and I was grateful for that. She said she was studying human history as part of her formal education. She said it confused her. Humans were fragile, she said. Short-lived by galactic standards, slow to heal, limited in range, entirely without any of the biological advantages that other species took for granted. And yet, she said, when she read the record of human choices across centuries, she found the same pattern again and again. Humans acted beyond what their survival required. She wanted to know why. I thought about it for longer than I expected to. Then I answered her honestly. I said that maybe it was because we knew how fast it was over. That when you are aware of how little time you have, every choice starts to feel like a last chance. A last chance to be worth something. A last chance to act in a way that survives the moment itself. I said I did not know if that was wisdom or just stubbornness dressed up nicely. She told me she was saving the message to her personal archive. She said she might quote it someday. I told her I would try not to say anything too foolish in the future, just in case. She sent back a single character from the Veth Khan writing system that my translator rendered as something between laughter and warmth. I saved it. I fly the same black I always did, the same stars, the same silence that the films always get wrong. I still talk to myself too much, still run on too little sleep, and too much bad coffee. I am still, at the core of everything, a salvage operator from the edge of nowhere. But when I pull into a port now, things are different. Transmissions get answered. Doors that were closed open quietly. Out in the dark where the little ships travel, where colony vessels carry ordinary people to new worlds, without anyone powerful watching over them, there is someone now who might hear a beacon and come. I look at the Velcom bead on my wrist sometimes. It catches the cockpit light and shifts, the way she said it would. I did not save Sevara to become anything. I saved her because she was there, and I could. And she was someone's child alone in the dark. That was the whole of it. But the universe noticed. And somewhere out there, a queen remembers my name. That means the dark remembers it too. It turns out that is enough to change everything.